A lot of people have recently compared me to Dave Ramsey, who is the author of several books about money, the Total Money Makeover being the most famous one. And I can see why people would think that. I actually didn't even know who Dave Ramsey was until around 2015. And when I first was told about Dave Ramsey, I didn't know anything. I had never heard of the guy. And then when I read his book, I was like, wow, I actually agree with a lot of the things he's saying. And I don't agree with everything he says, but I do agree with the principles that Dave Ramsey teaches when it comes to building wealth, retirement, getting out of debt, all these things that he talks about, funding your kids' education, buying a home, real estate. These are all things that is real grown-up shit. You know what I'm saying? This is like stuff that you got to really think about. And I really wish I had known about Dave Ramsey when I was younger. Coming from a Hispanic immigrant family, they had no idea who Dave Ramsey was. They knew about Cristina and Selena. You know what I'm saying? That's about it. Like, nobody in my family had any idea who Dave Ramsey was, and my dad was my only sort of inspiration when it came to money, and he certainly taught me a lot about what not to do. You see what I'm saying? But when I read the Dave Ramsey book, it wasn't that I learned from Dave Ramsey, even though I did in some of the other stuff he teaches, but it was more so that I agree with his idea of avoiding debt. Because debt really is what's stopping a lot of people from maybe not becoming rich, even though it certainly is for some, but from at least living happy and not having to live paycheck to paycheck, and maybe living, more comfortably and with less stress. Debt is something that is really bad. Now, someone will sit there and they'll tell you, oh, well, there is such thing as good debt. And in a way, there is such thing as good debt if you know how to leverage your money. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't know how to leverage their money, and unless you know how to do it, it's probably best not to really even try it. I do agree with a lot of what Ramsey says about avoiding debt. I don't agree with his dislike of credit cards, but I understand why. You see, he's right about one thing. Credit cards, and I'm going to be honest with y'all, credit cards are a bad thing unless you have the discipline to manage them correctly. If you find a credit card and you can use it the right way to earn back points, and you have enough discipline to pay the credit card before you are charged interest. I'm talking about you pay the card when you first get the bill and you're not charged any interest. If you have that discipline, you should be good to go. I do that. You know what I mean? You should be fine. The problem is when people don't pay their credit card, or they pay the bare minimum, and then the interest builds up, and then it ends up being a situation where they have to pay back these credit cards in X amount of time, or else their money is going to be put in jeopardy, or worse than that. And you have creditors calling you, and that's when things get bad. And the important thing to do is to avoid that. And so a main way to avoid that is to have discipline by not even getting a credit card. Because getting a credit card for the wrong person means access to what they think is free money, but it's not free money. You're actually getting screwed. You use that credit card, then you pay it back in, a year or whatever. You're going to pay it back with interest. You are losing money on that. And you're basically doing what's called short-term gain, long-term pain. You want to use a credit card to put down on a car or on furniture or whatever, and then people go into debt because other bills come up. They don't have an emergency fund, and they have to use the money they would have used to pay the credit card off to fund their emergency, whatever that may be. And so it's all about discipline. Because I feel like the problem with credit cards is that it gives you this sort of impulse purchase. Like, oh, I got my credit card. I cannot afford that $300 PlayStation. But you know what? I got a credit card, so I'm just going to buy it and enjoy it. And there's nothing wrong with enjoying something and treating yourself, right? But you have to have the discipline to look at it and say, okay, is this the right time for me? And it all comes down to your mentality. And it comes down to whether or not you're okay with being in debt and paying them back more money later on. I am not okay with that. Some people, though, prefer to live their life differently. Some people think that, well, I'm just going to enjoy my life now and not worry about the later, which is definitely one way to look at it. The only thing for me is I don't plan on dying anytime soon. And because of that, I want to enjoy the later and the now. And I've never been one of those guys. who has to spend money to have a good time, especially not buku amounts of money. I've never been that guy. I've always lived below my means. I've always tried to save up enough money. I've done videos on this. And the main thing is to avoid debt. Now, I used to be in debt. I had medical bills. Never had credit card debt, though, but I did have medical bills. I owed on a car at one time. Thankfully, that's been paid off. My main problem actually was the medical bills. That's really the debt I was in. Plus, in 2009, when I went homeless, I was unable to pay my apartment, which is why I went homeless. I couldn't afford my rent, and that wound up on my credit. So, me not being able to pay the rent, it wound up on my credit. I actually owed them for like 2 months, and I never got to pay them back. And it hurt my credit for many, many, many years until around 2000 and I want to say 2014 or 2013. So it was only about 5 years. I had heard it was going to be on there longer, but I was unable to get a credit card. I was literally unable to get a credit card from my bank until like 2013-14. So it really did affect me. And that's bad. I mean, that's the bad kind of debt. Good kind of debt is if you own a home and if you have multiple properties that you're paying mortgages on. But if you're getting rental income, you can pay the mortgage off faster and then get another property. And then by the time that's all paid off, you end up getting nothing but income. That's the real estate strategy. It's simplified in like under a minute, right? There's more to it than that, but I'm giving you the simple version. But the main thing to do is to avoid debt, because as long as you owe somebody something, it's going to be looming over your head. It's going to be constantly, gnawing at you. And you might sit there and think, well, I can just file for bankruptcy. Well, if you want to do that, great. But then you're really going to screw yourself for an X number of years, because you won't be able to buy a home or buy a boat or any of that kind of stuff. And it'll be hard for you to get a car. And there are ways around this. There are programs out there to help with this kind of thing. But the main thing you want to do is try to avoid it as much as possible. Now, obviously, life happens. You never know. You never know. You might end up in the hospital over something. You never know. In that case, it happens, okay? You can't stop it from happening. But in general, the key to avoiding debt is not to make impulse purchases. Instead of buying that, $10,000 car when you make $25,000 a year and just say, well, I'm going to pay it off in, 5 years, you're getting screwed on that one, buddy. Big time. You're getting screwed. The best thing to do is figure out how you can get a $2,000 car or even a $5,000 car. I drive a pretty damn good sports car, and I paid about $9,000 for it. It was $8,800 for my car, and it's a pretty damn nice Kia Forte. And not a lot of miles on it. You got to look around. You got to shop around. That's the main thing. Don't impulse buy. Shop around. You might get a better deal. Don't just buy the first thing you see when you test drive it. People have to get that in their heads. And if you want to save up to buy like a video game, don't like buy it on a credit card. Like save up the $60 if you can. If you're not making that much money, save it up and then, pay for it. Make sure your bills are paid first. You have to be a responsible adult at some point, and being a young person, because I've been there, is hard because you got your friends who sometimes make more money than you. They want to go out and eat. They want to spend, $25 at Benihana's on wontons and all these different things. They want to go out drinking and then there's also the Starbucks generation. They go and they spend $8 on a cup of coffee you can make at home. Is it as good? Probably not, but do you need it every day? Going to Starbucks once a week is fine. Once a month is probably better, but there's people who go every single day, multiple times a day, and it's unhealthy because you're running up a big bill here. You know what I mean? These are things you have to be disciplined in, but you got to make sure you avoid as much debt as possible. If you buy a home or if you buy a car and it's on a payment, pay it off as fast as possible. Make sure there's no prepayment penalties. Pay it off as fast as possible. Student loans, can't really avoid that. The loan prices are freaking crazy nowadays. That's one that's hard to avoid. But stuff like cars and homes, you have leverage there so you can pay it off faster. And you want to do that. You want to do it because you will feel great when you have it paid off, because that's one less monthly bill. Yes, you've got property taxes and repairs and all these different things you have to pay for, but it's not a monthly charge. You can always prepare for that with an emergency fund. You know what I mean? So there's always pros and cons to everything in life, but debt is mostly a con unless, like I said, you know how to leverage your money. So I would do my best to not focus on getting the shiny new thing, because you're only going to look cool for a couple of minutes and then people are going to forget about you. And that's a big thing. Don't go out and try to keeping up with the Johnsons or whatever that is, buying things that your neighbor has or trying to make everything look nice in one swoop. I bought my home 2018, I bought my house that I'm in right now, and I want to do some remodeling on it. I actually wanted to turn one of my rooms to a game room, which I am doing, but I'm doing it little by little. See, I could just go out and buy the arcade machines now, buy the couch now, buy the TV now, and blow like freaking 10 grand probably in I don't know about 10 grand, but you know, up there in a day. I'm not going to do that though, because I want to discipline myself into investing more and kind of slowly putting together that game room, because it won't be done anyways for a little while anyways. So maybe a couple more years it'll be finalized, and you know, I'll be older then, but it's okay because it's gonna be my little shack, you know what I mean? And maybe it'll take 1 year. I mean, we'll see. It's difficult to say right now, but we'll see. But that's me being disciplined, you know, and saying, okay, I want this now, but do I need this now? Probably not. I mean, I've got all my video games in my bedroom and my living room, so I don't need a game room now, but maybe in the future for guests and things like that, I would like to have a game room, you know what I mean? Just to kind of have one, you know, I guess maybe because people on the internet have one, like gaming channels, and so I want to have one, but it's also one of those things where it's like, I don't need it, but I want it. And there's things sometimes that you want and you don't need, but it's with things like that you want and don't need, be disciplined about your money, because if you take that $1,000 you spend on, I don't know, a Switch and several games, let's just say 1,000, you bought a bunch of games, and you invest that in the stock market or in some real estate investment trust or something like that, you might get a better return on that long term, especially if you're young. See, if I knew in my 20s what I know in my 30s, I would have a totally different life. I would have invested before the stock market crash. Obviously, hindsight's 2020. I would have invested in the stock market and probably be a very, very rich man by now. Very rich if you knew what to invest in. Obviously, nobody knows what to invest in, and we're not unless you're a financial analyst. I was in a different part of my life at that point, but I wish I had known to at least save up for retirement, because my retirement portfolio would be a lot more impressive then if I started then than it would be now, which is why I'm telling people now, if you're listening to this and you're young, invest now, because the compound interest over 10 years between the age of 20 and 30 is going to be so much better than my compound interest between the age of 30 and 40. You have an extra decade to build up compound interest before you retire. You know, and I'm just using those numbers as basis here. It could be 25, whatever. The younger you are, the better it is to save up for retirement, and it's time to start now, yo. That is true. Like everything that guy teaches, Dave Ramsey, I don't agree with everything he says. There are good ways of having a credit card if you pay it off before you know, get interest payments. And if you're disciplined, there's things you can do. But still, you know, the principles are there. Avoid debt and you'll be happier. Thanks for watching.